Good afternoon. My name is Rihanna Davis, and I will be talking to you about my case that I will be presenting to you guys. And the case that I'm going to be talking about is the PETA versus KFC case. And basically, I'm just going to give you guys a basic summary about like what happened. I'm going to tell you guys like what BG model I chose and what Hosfate, I think it's Hosfate model that I chose as well. Okay, so I'm not going to be the only person that's in this project. There's going to be another person as well. So today we're going to be presenting the case about the PETA versus KFC case. This case focuses on the ethical contact between the major fast food corporation and the animal rights organization. The issue centers around animal welfare corporation responsibilities and public accountability. I will be analyzing this case using the stakeholders theory and the Hosfate cultural division and individualism versus collectivism theory. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to give you guys just a summary about the case. PETA, which stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, launched a campaign accusing KFC of cruel treatment of the chickens. And basically they were saying like the chickens were raised wrong. PETA claimed that the chickens were kept crowded in a condition. They weren't being treated rightly, handled roughly, and transportation and slaughtered in ways that you could never imagine. So PETA demanded that KFC requires its suppliers to adopt more of a human standard, like to treat the chickens more like humans. Why, I don't know, but they're chicken, we're gonna eat them. This included slower growth rates, better living conditions, and improved handling methods and stricter monitoring system. KFC responded by stating that it is not they don't directly raise the chicken, but just purchase them independently from the suppliers. The company explained it follows the industry's regulations and created animal welfare guidelines through its parent company called Yum Brands. KFC also formed advisor councils and implemented auditing systems to see over the suppliers. However, PETA argued that these changes were not strong enough, and the public conflict, like it just became a whole lot of public conflict, including protests, discriminations, public conflict, including protests, demonstrations, media attention, and consumer boycotts. Even though KFC sales continue to grow, the case raised seriously ethical questions. It raised seriously ethical questions for the corporation's responsibility. Okay, cool. So the BG model that I will be choosing is the stakeholders model. So basically, I chose the stakeholder model because it analyzes this case very well. It shows that that the business are not only responsible for the shareholders who profit. They're not only responsible for the shareholders, but they're responsible for those who profit. Hold on. Okay, businesses are responsible not only to shareholders, but the people who profit off of the shareholders. So all of the stakeholders are affected by the corporation's decisions. Stakeholders including customers, employees, suppliers, investors, communities, and advocacy groups. In this case, stakeholders also included the animals' right organizations and the animals themselves. KFC must balance financial performances with the ethical concerns. Shareholders want profits, consumers want affordable food, suppliers want contrast, and activists demand human treatment for the animals. Stakeholders help us understand the tension between economic goals and ethical responsibility. This case clearly shows how corporations operate in a complex environment where many groups influence decision making. And that is my half of the video. So you guys have a nice day. My name is Brianna Davis, and my partner will be finishing the rest.
Hello, my name is Fiona Hernandez Prieto, and in this part of the presentation, I will explain how HostFeed cultural dimensions theory help us understand the conflict between KFC and the activist organization PETA, and how it connects with the stakeholder theory. Okay, so HostFeed cultural dimensions is a framework that explains how cultural values influence the way people think, behave, and respond to organizations. It helps businesses understand differences between societies and how those differences affect customer expectations and reactions. One important cultural dimension is individualism versus collectivism. This dimension refers to whether a society values individual rights and personal responsibility, or whether it focuses more on group harmony and collective interests. In more individualistic cultures, people tend to feel personally irresponsible for supporting ethical causes. Because of this, consumers may actively support movements that defend animal rights or environmental protection. Also, in the case of the campaign against KFC, many individuals supported PETA's activism because they believed companies should be responsible for how animals are treated in their supply chains. Another relevant dimension is the power distance. Power distance describes how comfortable people are with unequal power relationships between institutions and individuals. In cultures with low power distance, people are more likely to question authority and challenge large corporations. This makes activism, protests, and public criticisms of company more common. In this context, organizations like PETA feel empowered to publicly challenge company like KFC and demand changes in their practices. A third dimension that can be connected to this case is long-term orientation. This dimension refers to whether societies prioritize long-term values, such as sustainability, responsibility, and future consequences. In cultures with stronger long-term orientation, people often expect companies to consider ethical and sustainable practices rather than focusing only on short-term profit. Because of these, issues such as animal welfare can become very important for consumers and activists. These cultural dimensions help explain why public reaction to the case became so strong and why activist campaigns can gain significant support. Now, we can connect this cultural perspective with the stakeholder theory. Okay, so the stakeholder theory explains what companies are responsible not only to shareholders, but also to all the groups that are affected by the company's action. These groups are known as stakeholders. In the KFC case, the main stakeholders include the company itself, its shareholders, consumers, suppliers, and activists groups like PETA. Even though PETA does not have direct economic relationship with KFC, it still has the ability to influence the company through media campaigns and public pressure and all that stuff. This makes PETA a secondary stakeholder. When we combine HostFeed's framework with stakeholder theory, we can see that cultural values influence on how stakeholders behave in societies. When people value individual responsibility, ethical consumption, and questioning authority, stakeholders such as activist organizations and consumers are more likely to change companies and demand change. Because of these cultural expectations, the pressure created by PETA was able to attract public attention and influence KFC's reputation. As a result, the company had to respond publicly and reconsider how they address concerns about animal welfare. In conclusion, the host-fate cultural dimension help explain how stakeholders react the way they do, while the stakeholder theory explains how those stakeholders can influence the corporate behavior. Together, these frameworks helps us understand why the conflict between PTA and KFC became such a visible and important issue.